Hello, people, and welcome back to another episode of Super Symple Podcast. I am your host, Alex, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see that I have a nice new setup behind me. I've got some of my collectibles showing. I tried to fill as many spots over here with posters and pictures, so it's not completely covered, but I'm working on it. If you're listening to this on Spotify right now, I gotta tell you, you're missing out, man. You gotta come to the YouTube and watch it on the YouTube. So, I don't know if a lot of you know this, but there is actually a Child's Play show being developed right now for Sci-Fi Network, and if you don't know what Child's Play is, it's the series that made Chucky famous. If you don't know who Chucky the doll is, then you live under a rock, plain and simple. So I wanted to take a little bit of time in this episode to kind of get people ready for the release of that show, because I know that a lot of people know who Chucky is, but they didn't care to watch the movies, which is understandable. And I'm going to do things a little bit differently in this episode, because these movies at some point are made to not be taken seriously, and you can tell by the way that the writing is, the way that the direction of these films is, and it has that same curse that a lot of these 80s slasher movies have, where they grow out to be dark comedy films at some point, and I don't understand why they think that's a good idea. But anyway, we're gonna jump right into this one, and usually I write down an entire script that goes into really deep detail of the movie, but there's just so much shit going on in this series. I kind of just took every single movie and gave away like the biggest points you'll need to know to move forward onto the next one. And then when we wrap all this together, we're going to talk about like a deep dive into the series as a whole. And hopefully by the end of this podcast, you will be familiar with the Child's Play series and will be ready to watch it when it releases in 3 weeks, the TV series. So, we're going to jump into it by talking about Child's Play. It was released in 1988, and the series was created by Don Mancini. It starred Brad Dourif as this series' lead slasher, Charles Lee Ray, aka Chucky. This movie opens with Charles Lee Ray on the run from police for abducting and murdering a pregnant woman, and this leads them to a toy store. Charles performs a voodoo ritual that allows him to transfer his soul into a good guy doll which is found nearby, making the police think that they killed him. After being purchased by Andy's mother from a shady guy in an alley, Chucky is brought home to Andy and begins killing everyone close to him. Originally, this series was made to be a full-on horror series, with this one focusing predominantly on psychological horror, but the series eventually bleeds into a dark comedy, then full-on comedy, then back to taking itself seriously. So again, Chucky torments the Barkley family in this one, and by the end of it, Chucky is presumably dead, but we all know with horror genres, they're not going to do that. They're going to milk the absolute shit out of him until there's nothing left, and would you believe it? They do that. So going into Child's Play 2, this one was released in 1990, once again written by Don Mancini, but this time being directed by John LaFia. This one goes full-on slasher film, featuring heavy elements of the subgenre and mixed with a little bit of dark humor, which you could start to see where Chucky kind of slipped, like almost a Freddy type situation, where they were just like, this dude kills people, why in the hell is he wisecracking right now? But Alex Vincent, who played Andy in the original, returns to reprise the role in this one, but this time being put in foster care after his mother was put in a mental hospital for backing his claims of Chucky, and of course Andy is still being stalked and followed by Chucky. So this one opens with the PlayPal Corp, who created the good guy dolls, reassembling him in an attempt to show the stockholders that these dolls aren't evil, but when a power surge overcharges the warehouse, it awakens Chucky. So, really quickly, I don't hate this one, but I don't like this one. In my opinion, for the Child's Play series, the best ones are the first one and the last one that was made. Not the reboot, but the last one in this continuation. There's just something about this series that when they make it serious, it's good and it's scary, and I like the elements of it. But if you add even one little wisecrack in there, it seems to like throw the Don Mancini for a fucking loop, and he's like, "Oh, I made a joke. Well, guess Chucky has to be a fucking comedian for the rest of this movie." But this movie ends with Chucky being sucked into a machine while chasing Andy and his foster sister, Kyle. So now we're going to get into Child's Play 3, which is when the series really starts to get weak, in my opinion. This one, to me personally, is almost unwatchable. And this one's only rivaled by one other in the series, which we're going to get to in a minute, and it's a real fucking dumpster fire. So Child's Play 3 was released only a year after the previous one and saw Don Mancini returning to write the film, with Jack Bender behind the camera this time, and of course Brad Dourif returning to play Chucky. This movie takes place 8 years after Part 2, even with the short gap in release between each film. So obviously they couldn't bring back Alex Vincent as Andy because this one is 8 years after that, even though they started production on it almost a month after the release of 2. So this movie is, I actually didn't know this. This is cool. I gotta break away from the script. I actually didn't know this because I take what I remember from the films and then I research them and I make sure that my information is correct and then I put it into these episodes. But I didn't fucking know this. So, Child's Play 3 is actually notorious in the UK because it is believed that this movie inspired the murder of 2 children, James Bulger and Suzanne Capper. I did not know that. Of course, the police denounce these claims anytime it's brought up, but a lot of people in the UK heavily believe that this movie was responsible for leading into those murders, so that's crazy. And why this one? This one fucking sucks. But this movie opens with the PlayPal Corporation finally recovering from all the murders that are blamed on the good guy dolls. They reopen the factory that Chucky was killed in, and when they begin manufacturing a new line of good guy dolls, Chucky is revived. Andy is now 16 and is in military school, now being played by Justin Whalen. Chucky gets himself sent into the same military school and then begins manipulating the other students around in an attempt to get them to help him trap and kill Andy for all the shit Andy's put him through. So, again, I'm going to break away for a second and explain my feelings on this one because I'm not quite sure what the angle was here. I mean, this one also makes Chucky like this smart-ass, conniving shithead, and this is where he starts to get too jokey, in my opinion. And I really don't like this movie. It's super boring. I think the Justin Whalen, the guy playing Andy in this one, I think he's a bad actor. He does not do good at all. The only highlight of this series is, of course, Brad Dourif, because it feels like everybody else for the longest just knows that he is the centerpiece of this series, so they all treat their roles like it's shit. And they're terrible. These movies get so bad. It's one of those situations where, I've seen each one of these movies, but there's one or two of them that I've seen once, and I have absolutely refused to sit down and rewatch them because they were absolute dog shit. And this is one of them. When this movie would come on during, the AMC Halloween Horror Fest or whatever, I would cut this shit off. Because I just could not stomach sitting through this movie. But of course, we're not here to this podcast to listen to me, bitch. We're here to review Child's Play. So this movie ends with Chucky being thrown into a giant fan, presumably shredding him to death. But with, of course, Chucky, they're going to find a way. So then we get into Bride of Chucky, which to me is where the series completely establishes itself as not a serious horror series at all. This one is really fucking bad. It was released 7 years after the last one in 1998, and this time was directed by, weirdly enough, the Freddy vs. Jason director Ronnie Yu, but was still being written by Don Mancini. This one had a full-on dark comedy vibe, with Jennifer Tilly portraying Tiffany, a woman obsessed with Charles Lee Ray being an ex-girlfriend of his, and she bribes the cop into giving her the remains of the Chucky doll, which she then brings back to life. The opening to this film is actually a little bit cool, not gonna lie, because in the evidence locker you see things like Freddy's glove, Jason's hockey mask, Leatherface's chainsaw, you see a butcher knife for Michael, so it is insinuating that the Chucky films take place in the same universe as like all the big 80s slasher villains, and that they're all connected together. So I thought that was really cool. It never goes anywhere. There was this stupid ass rumor back when I was in like middle school that they were gonna make Leprechaun versus Chucky, but of course that never happened because that would be a giant flaming shit pile of a film. So, in this one, after some antagonizing, Chucky kills Tiffany by electrocution in a bathtub after she locks him in a playpen and taunts him with a girl doll in a wedding dress. Chucky then puts her soul into the doll, and they are set out to retrieve an amulet from Ray's body that will allow them to transfer their souls into Tiffany's neighbors. This movie ends when Chuckany, oh my god, that's a great relationship name. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna roll with it. So this movie ends with Chuckany kidnaps the neighbors, force them to take Chucky to Charles Lee Ray's gravesite, and Chucky and Tiffany then get into an instigated fight, and it all ends when Chucky is presumably killed while being in his own grave. But Tiffany then begins screaming, and Jesus freaking Christ gives birth to a baby doll, which then attacks the detective who rolls up on the scene. And this is when they should have just marketed this movie as like just a dark comedy. This movie would have worked better as a porn parody, and I'm convinced by that. So, remember when I mentioned the absolute dog shit film that I hate to watch and I won't watch ever again? It's this one, fucking Seed of Chucky. So Seed of Chucky was released in 2004 and was written and directed by Don Mancini, making this his first actual directorial debut. And it's sad because this movie blows really fucking bad, but has an overall story to tell of Chucky's son being transsexual and wanting to be a girl named Glenda. So they do talk about a sensitive topic, and they go about it quite well, to the point to where even at the end, Chucky like understands what Glenn is going through, and he's like, oh my god, I fucking get it. But it's still a bad movie. It's got bad acting, bad jokes, terrible scenes. Like there's a scene with Britney Spears where Chucky like runs her off the road and makes a Britney Spears pun, and it's just garbage. It's absolute shit. I'm not gonna really talk about this one because it obviously feels like it wasn't made to be taken as a serious film. But again, it follows Chucky, Tiffany, and their son Glenn, who doesn't want to be a serial killer. Instead, he wants to be what he considers normal. So the fact that Chucky and them are killers actually disgusts him throughout most of this movie. This movie ends with Glenn getting his soul transferred into a little girl after the death of Tiffany and Chucky, and he now goes by the name of Glenda, being in an actual human body. So Glenn gets what he wants at the end, but now he acts more like Chucky. So now he's a serial killer doll, but he's in a person's body. So then we get into Curse of Chucky, and this actually brought a smile to my face, Thanos style, because this is when the series decides to step back, take a look at what it's become, and then progress forward by basically rewriting, what we know to be the Child's Play movies. Earthquake! So this one was released in 2013 as a supernatural slasher film, and it was once again written and directed by, you guessed it, Don Mancini, who basically has written every single movie in the series, so I'm gonna save you the trouble of having to hear that again. Excuse me. So this one sees the series go toward the horror genre, and in my opinion revives this franchise in a pretty great way. It was also the first direct-to-video release for the series, not having its own theatrical release. So Brad Dourif plays Chucky once again, but the cool thing is this time the main character that we're focusing on is actually played by Brad's real daughter, Fiona Dourif, and she's pretty damn great in this role. So this movie opens with a good guy calling itself Chucky being delivered to a paraplegic woman named Nika Pierce, who again is Fiona Dourif, pretty sick. She lives in a secluded house off by herself with her caretaker Sarah, who is then found dead the next morning from a stab wound. Chucky does what he does best throughout this movie, killing everyone who comes into contact with Nika one by one before Nika finds out who he really is. Unfortunately for him, Chucky doesn't get his hands on her as planned. Instead, this movie ends with Nika being transferred to a mental hospital after she is blamed for the murders of everybody in the film. And, I lost my place. Okay, so we're back. This is why I need to get some editing software. I'm actually about to just go gung ho and spend a lot of money on some editing software so shit like this doesn't happen. But it's weird because YouTube doesn't get it, but when I record these podcasts, I'm used to just sitting down and running through it in one sitting. So when I stumble over my words and I realize I'm on camera, I start to panic for a minute, but then I'm like, it's fine, it doesn't fucking matter, you're just overreacting. So, Tiffany then reappears in this franchise and is able to kill a cop holding on to Chucky in an evidence bag, and Chucky is then sent on to another victim. The after credits scene for this one reveals that he was sent to a now grown up Andy, being played by the same actor from the first film, Alex Vincent, who then reveals that he was waiting for Chucky to arrive, pointing a shotgun in his face and pulling the trigger. So they quickly establish that Andy's a badass, and I really like that. So now we are on to the last film in this main continuity, as the reboot doesn't even attempt to continue this story, instead reinventing the Child's Play series, and it wasn't bad in my opinion. It's just probably not going to warrant a whole new series of sequels. So, this movie was released in 2017 and continued the direction of Don Mancini. It's called Cult of Chucky. I don't know if I said that. But it features most of the characters from the previous films reprising their roles, including Alex Vincent as Andy Barkley and Fiona Dourif as Nika Pierce. So this film opens with Andy still being in possession of Chucky, who is now just a severed head. Meanwhile, Nika is still locked up in the asylum after the events of the previous film, and she now believes that she was the killer all along and that Chucky was never real. It is revealed that Nika's niece, Alice, is now in the care of Tiffany Valentine, Chucky's wife, but she reveals to Nika that Alex has died from a broken heart. Nika is then given a good guy doll and told that Alice wanted her to have it. Chucky wakes up that night and sees that Nika has committed suicide, but she awakens the next morning with her wrist stitched back together and a note that says, "Not so fast." It is revealed in this movie, along the course of this film, that Chucky was somehow able to transfer his soul into multiple dolls, creating a tiny cult of Chuckies. Alice was one of those cult members, but she died after an altercation. One of the dolls then transfers its soul into Nika, reanimating her body and allowing her to walk again, because again, she's a paraplegic. So a lot of stuff happens in this movie. It's like balls to the walls crazy, but it all results in the institution being sent into lockdown, locking Andy inside and allowing Nika, now sharing a part of Chucky's soul, to leave the building and reunite with Tiffany, whose doll is in the back seat and is also alive after Tiffany had done the same ritual. The after credit scene for this one is again a banger because it involves the return of Kyle, Andy's foster sister, who shows up at Andy's house to continue to torture the severed Chucky head, while Andy devises a plan on how to free himself and save Nika. So again, that was the last film in the main continuity that was started in '88, and they decided to do a Child's Play reboot, in which this time the great Mark Hamill came on to portray the voice of Chucky, and they rewrote the Chucky doll to be some kind of like a smart AI type thing. And again, it's not bad. I think in terms of like Child's Play movies, when the original came out in the 80s, it probably scared the shit out of people because they weren't expecting that. But with reboots, it's like you know what to expect, so they have to take something and change it, or you're just watching the same movie over and over again. So in this one, there is no Charles Lee Ray. It is a overworked warehouse worker in Tijuana, I think, is upset with the way he's being treated. So he basically hacks a Chucky doll's computer chip and turns it evil, and then releases it out onto the world. How Andy's mom gets the doll is kind of the same way. There's a lot of callbacks to the original in the reboot, but again, I feel like even though it was a decent movie in my opinion, I think it fell really short in terms of impressing people, and that has unfortunately caused it to not get any sequels. As far as I know, I haven't seen any talks of any sequels. But what's cool is, again, I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast that there is a Chucky TV series that had been in development for a good while now, and was actually being worked on by Don Mancini. And this one looks like it's set to continue the new story that he set up in Curse and Cult of Chucky, and I'm all here for it. I think it's great. It brings the franchise back to being horror and not so much silly. And again, that's what ruins all of these movies, is the first one is this really good serious thriller, and then the rest of them are these really shitty like dark comedy films that just don't make any sense. It's like almost they wanted to turn Chucky into like a household character, and it just ended up falling short. And it's weird because the original guy has worked on every movie in this series but the reboot. So why in the hell would he write his own series to flop so hard before realizing, oh yeah, I established this as a horror film, so I'm gonna have to bring it back to those horror elements. And I don't know. I don't hate this franchise. There are definitely way worse franchises out there, but this damn sure isn't one of the best. It's not one of my favorites. I actually kind of like Chucky, but I don't like watching the movies, and that's weird. I kind of just like him for the character because Brad Dourif kicks ass. So that basically brings this episode to a close, and I hope you all enjoyed listening to me rant and basically poop on another franchise. I would like to do a franchise episode where it's a really good franchise and I have nothing but great stuff to say, but unfortunately when they do these long running series, it's gonna fall short. And it's, wow, my cats are going crazy right now. But it's gonna fall short, and it's gonna not be liked by a lot of people. And I mean, all of this stuff is my opinion anyway. Maybe you'll sit down and watch the Child's Play series and you'll decide that you really like it and Chucky's like one of your favorite slasher characters. I get it. That's fine. I'm not saying you're wrong. Yeah. So, yeah, we're gonna end it there. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, I'm about to start plugging shit, so you better sit tight and listen to me plug some shit. So, the YouTube channel is just starting out. I'm actually hoping to reach a lot of people. Excuse me, cats. What are we doing right now? Jeez Louise. So that's probably going to happen a lot because I have 2 cats and a dog, and they like to play with each other. So that's probably going to happen a lot. But yeah, the YouTube channel is new. I'm trying to reach and branch out to as many people that might also enjoy the type of content that I talk about, because I genuinely want to build an audience of people that I can communicate with and discuss things like movies and comic books and stuff with, because I really find that type of stuff interesting. And I just really like having those conversations with people. I love knowing what people's opinions are on certain things, especially when it comes to horror films. So, if you're listening on Spotify, I ask you to please head over to the YouTube channel, give the page a subscribe click, like the videos, comment down below. I will respond. I will argue with you if you come there just to argue with me. So if you want to do that, that's fine. I love it. If you're on YouTube, you know what to do. I've already repeated myself like 3 or 4 times, but I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. I'm your host, Alex. This was Super Simple Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm not 100% sure what we're going to do for the next episode, but it's going to be something cool. We're slowly dwindling down, so I think after this one releases on Friday, there's only 4 episodes left. So, I want to talk about a little bit of like random content since the season 1's almost over. But it kind of just like, it's spur of the moment stuff for me. I'm like, yes, let's do an episode about this, and then I immediately start working on it and it's released. So I have ADHD. I can't always make up my mind on what I do. But again, thank you for watching, listening, subscribing, liking, commenting. You guys are the shit. Again, it was a huge motivation to see the subscribers roll in 1 or 2 days like they did, because I didn't even expect for anybody to subscribe. So again, thank you so much. I love you guys. You guys are great. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. As always, have a great night, people.